My name is Jake, and this is TANDEMKROSS. This is an instructional video on how to install the TANDEMKROSS hammer bushing into the Mark III 2245. Before you handle any firearm, ensure that the firearm is clear and safe before you do anything. This gun has been cleared, and you can see there's nothing in the chamber. I have no ammo around, and there's nothing in the mag well. The Mark III is a fantastic handgun, and there's been very many of them sold. However, if you own one of these guns, you know that there's a couple of things that can be annoying. The first is whenever you do a field cleaning, you have to put the magazine in and out several times, or at least twice, in order to do the full process. The other thing that's annoying with these, and you find it particularly in the polymer, is the magazines won't drop out. So let's start by field stripping the gun and getting it down to just the receiver. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that there's no tension on the mainspring. So in order to do that, we have to put the magazine in before we take that mag disconnect out. So that's one thing that I don't like. So the tension's off now, and now we can pull open the mainspring. Now we have to put the magazine back in order to get that hammer out of the way so that the bolt will properly come out of there. So take the bolt out, and then we can remove the receiver from the barrel. The parts that we're working on today, you're going to see this piece right here is the magazine disconnect lever, and this is going to come out of the gun, and the bushing is going to take up the space that this magazine disconnect lever and spring are currently sitting in. If you look closely, there's a tail of the sear spring right behind the safety. The safety is this long metal piece here next to the hammer, and you'll look inside, you'll see a little tail to that spring. And what I like to do, so I like to take that spring and pull it out of the notch, and then you can gently push the pin directly out. You'll see a lot of videos where folks are hammering or pounding on their gun, and on some models you may have a stiff pin, but if you're careful, you can very easily just slide this right out without having to do a lot of hammering. You want to be real careful not to mar up the face of your gun. Now, a couple of things to point out. I'm only going to pull this pin most of the way out. I'm going to leave it so that it stays inside of the safety, and that's going to allow the gun to it's going to allow the sear and the safety to maintain position. Another hint or another tip: if you put the safety in the safe position before you begin, the sear will have less tendency to move around on you. So now, if you just walk that pin out until this entire component comes free, then you can lift it straight out of here. Just like that. Now you don't want to let this come out, this trigger bar come out too far, because there is a plunger right here with a little spring, and that can go flying. So you want to keep track of that. Now the components that have come out of here, you can see they've actually come apart already. You have the hammer, and you have the other components of that magazine safety. There'll be a spring, and the lever, and then there'll be the factory bushing. And these three pieces are what are going to be replaced by the TANDEMKROSS hammer bushing. So here we have a brand new tandem cross hammer bushing. And you can see it has a stepped profile that will go into that gap on the hammer and take up that space where these components once were. Now let's take a look at the bushing going into the hammer and then going back into the gun. So if we take another look here, a couple of things to inspect. Ensure that your plunger is inside your trigger still, and you want to ensure that your sear is still pushed forward and captured inside of the safety, and that the hammer pin is pushed just to the face of the safety on the inside. The tail of the sear spring, you want to have it toward the rear of the receiver, so you want to have it on the back side of this pin. So if you've pulled the pin all the way out and the sear has flopped around and you've dropped the safety out of here, which happens many times, you can put this all back together and get it to this state. The notch in the hammer pin, you want it to be the last thing that goes in, and you want that tail of the sear riding on the rear so that it will ride and go right into that notch. And then you take your hammer, and what we're going to do is we're going to get it right inside of this trigger bar, tail to the back, and you want to get it so that that lines up right with your pin. There. So once you get that to line up, you'll be able to seat it and make sure that it goes all the way through and comes flush on both sides. Now you can test your hammer. You can put some pressure against it and see that it's catching. Pull the trigger and you'll see that it moves freely. Now that disconnect has been completely removed and you won't need it to field strip the gun anymore. And well, you'll see once I put this back together that those magazines will now in fact drop free. So now we can start to put this back together. Drop this in. Make sure the hammer is down. Drop straight in. We want to make sure that the tail of that hammer gets out of the way for this next step. So you'll notice we're able to do that now because we have no need to put the magazine in. Insert this. Now, the last little trick, you'll notice there's no tension because that hammer, the tail of that hammer hasn't come back again. So again, I can simply get that hammer in the right position, and now you'll see there's tension as the tail of that hammer is going into the mainspring. So now we're fully ready to go, and all without a magazine. Now when we put the magazine back in, you'll notice that they seat much easier and that they drop right out. So that's the installation of the tandem cross hammer bushing in a Mark III 2245. So my name is Jake, and this is Tandem Cross.